Thank you very much, Erin. And hi, Nikki. Good to be presenting with you again. And hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. Welcome to today. I'm Robin Stern. I'm the co-founder and associate director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and a psychoanalyst by training and in practice in New York City. I'm at the center. I work a lot in the area of mental health and in resilience in particular this year, where it's much needed, building pathways to resilience, and our skills are kind of perfect for that. And really, really happy to be here today to meet you where you are and to hopefully be helpful in helping you manage your emotions. Nikki?
Hi, everyone. My name is Nikki Albertson. I am the Director of Content and Communications at the Center for Emotional Intelligence, where I've worked for almost 20 years. I have my 20th anniversary coming up in a few months. So I've been there almost half of my life, which is also crazy. Outside of my work at the Center for Emotional Intelligence, I'm a group fitness instructor and I'm certified in personal training and health coaching. So I have a lot of emotion regulation strategies that have to do with sweating and getting enough sleep and getting the right food. So welcome everyone. And I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you. And actually in that line of thinking, if you could in the chat, just tell us who you are, where you're zooming in from. We'd love to hear from you. Lots of nurses from Trumbull. Virginia. Bethel.
A lot of Trumbull. Florida. Wonderful.
Do all of you Trumbull folks know each other? Yes, many of you do. It looks like, okay. Great. All right. So this is our first quote of the day that we'll put in here. And if you could just read it to yourself. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. And just reflecting on that quote, feel free to put in the chat anything that comes to mind as it relates to your life right now, your job as a nurse. How does this sort of resonate for you? Just keep swimming. I'd love to hear more about that one. Hang in there. Dory and Finding Nemo. We're never done learning. Listen to members, stay calm. Practice better self-care. Sometimes when you know better, it's still hard to do better. I think about this quote for me personally as I need reminders of what I know and how I can do better, because you're right. Sometimes we know and we still don't take the best path, but it's easy to forget. And it's easy not to call to mind the knowledge we have when we're stressed, when we have a lot of things going on. Great. So there are some great thoughts in the chat. If you haven't had a chance to read through them, feel free. And this is really the focus of today is we're going to offer you some strategies for doing a little better, maybe generating some new strategies and some new knowledge, but maybe just having you call to mind some things that you already know so that you can use that knowledge to do better in the moment, as all of us are managing so many things these days. So the title of this conversation was on managing emotions. And so we wanted to start by asking you about how you manage emotions. So our first question on this slide is for you to name some unhelpful strategies, so unhelpful ways that you manage your emotions. And if you've never managed your emotions in an unhelpful way, then maybe something you've seen someone else do that might be an unhelpful way of managing emotions. You can just put it right in the chat. Food.
Nikki, did you suggest that there might be people here who have never managed their emotions in an unhelpful way? I want
Yeah.
to meet this person.
So yeah, just something you've seen one of those other people in your life do. Stress eating, wine, food, Malomars, overworking,
I think I
eating.
spelled it wrong, actually.
I had to, Robin and I talked about this a bit before. I had to ask her what if a Malomar was like a, what's the other one that I used to eat? Mellow cup. I don't know. Anyway, ignore, sleeping, food, shopping, holding a grudge, online shopping, isn't it? It's just too accessible these days. It used to be that you had to go to the store when it was open, and now you can just jump online and shop anytime for anything.
John, do you
Overcaring.
want to say more about overcaring?
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem that I have. I'm in a 12-step group because I overcare for people. I mean, I sometimes tell people that I became a nurse unknowingly because I found a way to get paid for being, codependent. That's what I divert back to when I want to control things and fix things for everybody. It's not healthy,
I'm sure you're
nor
not.
productive for myself or others.
Yeah, I'll bet there are many overcarers in this Zoom room. Thank you, John.
And caring and empathy and compassion are good things, but we can overdo it, and it's not helpful to us in our self-care to do that. So that's a great one. So we have talked about all of the unhelpful strategies that others do. So let's talk about helpful strategies. So in the chat, name some things you do to manage your emotions that you think help you, or maybe things that you would like to do more often, or that you would like to try to manage your emotions in helpful ways. Singing, I love it. Dancing. Exercise, mindfulness, thankfulness. Only eating unhealthy foods every once in a while. It's a good one. So moderation, praying, pausing, taking a dog for a walk. Walk wine or walk chocolate. I threw wine in there. Gratitude, exercise, talking to a friend. I will tell you one of my most helpful strategies that I only have discovered during the pandemic. If you haven't heard of it, there is a podcast called 10% Happier. And it focuses on psychology and meditation. And they have amazing interviews of scientists on topics like about how to be a happier person, how to squeeze small things into your day, how to have better relationships. And I listen to it on double speed, and I take a walk before my workday a couple days a week. Highly recommend that one. Thanks, Erin. We put the podcast in the chat. It's free too. They have some other features you can pay for, but I love that one. And I just discovered it during the pandemic. So let's talk about some of these unhelpful strategies. We saw a lot of different ones, and I'm not going to read through all of them, but sometimes, we say things that are unhelpful or negative to ourselves. So we could be a cheerleader, we could be a supportive, encouraging friend, but we tend to say things like, I'm such an idiot, or, oh, that always happens to me. And so we can say unhelpful things. Venting and complaining, we know that it's comforting sometimes, and we connect with people that way, but we also know that it actually makes us feel worse when we vent and complain. There are things that we
Nikki,
do.
I just want to jump in on that because I do think as a therapist through the years, I actually believe that complaining can be useful if it's not overdone. So just like in John's conversation about caring, you can be over caring, you can be over complaining, but there's nothing wrong with complaining and voicing what you don't like.
Yes. However, if you are complaining whenever there's a problem and not focusing on solutions, then it also can kind of make you feel worse and
Yep.
without getting anywhere. So that's
Agreed.
right. That's right. So these next few here are really just about, avoiding or denying or suppressing the feelings. So we don't want to think about them, ignoring them, wishful thinking. So this will resolve itself on its own when it's really something that you need to get involved in order to resolve. Rumination, so just kind of running something over in your head over and over again. I'm good for that one. Worrying, blaming yourself or others, putting it off, yelling, screaming, physical aggression, all poor habits, some of the things that came up in the chat. So going for the junk food, not getting enough sleep, not getting that walk or that physical activity, and then abusing substances. For some of us, a glass of wine, fine, a bit of ice cream, fine. But when you overdo all of those things, it's when it's unhelpful. So what's the difference between helpful and unhelpful strategies? So as you can see with some of the things we just mentioned, these unhelpful strategies, they tend to happen without any effort. We kind of automatically can do them and we may disengage. They are unhelpful because they decrease our health and our well-being. They don't solve the problem. They could negatively impact our relationships. For example, the physical aggression, the yelling, the screaming, the complaining too much. And just in general, these strategies that we use that are unhelpful, they sometimes provide immediate relief, like the bottle of wine or the half gallon of ice cream or the staying up all night and binging on Netflix, but they derail us from achieving our goals. The helpful strategies, on the other hand, they tend to require a little more effort. Sometimes they require practice. They often involve us engaging with something. So rather than laying back and watching Netflix, we're going to jump in and we're going to make that call to a friend, or we're going to journal, or we're going to try to solve the problem head on. They require planning. They tend to promote our health and our well-being. They tend to help us to build and maintain relationships. And just in general, they're more focused on solutions. So let's talk about some of these strategies. And a lot of them came up in the chat. One way that we think about strategies at the Center for Emotional Intelligence, we kind of categorize strategies into two main areas: things we can do, or action strategies, and things we can think about, or thought strategies. And the beauty of the thought strategies is they're in our head, so we can do them anytime, any place. The action strategies are usually helpful, but sometimes they take a little more planning, or you can only do them at a certain time or in a certain place. So action strategies are those healthy habits: eating well, getting enough sleep, getting your body moving, leaning on a friend, constructive activity. So creating something, I mentioned journaling, but I also like to bead jewelry. That's something that's very therapeutic to me. Lots of things you can do to create for constructive activity. We mentioned avoidance as an unhelpful strategy, but if it's a situation that's helpful to avoid, like interacting with someone who you don't have to interact with, or modifying your situation so that you don't interact with them as much, that can be a helpful strategy. Problem solving, and then seeking professional help. So some of those thought strategies that we can do anytime, any place, because they're up here, is acceptance. So just acknowledging that this is happening right now, and I need to accept that this is here right now, and eventually things will actually change, or accepting the feelings you have. Visualizing, having a happy place you go to in your mind, or visualizing a positive outcome. Humor can be a helpful strategy, just to think of something in a different way that makes you laugh, or try to make light of something that you've really been ruminating on in a different way. Distracting yourself, especially in the short term, can sometimes help us to actually come back to the problem and solve it in a clearer way with a clearer head. And these last three, we're going to spend a little more time on. And I'm going to take you through the first two, self-talk and reappraisal. And then I'm going to turn it over to Robin to talk about our best selves, which is really the focus of today. So we call these master thought strategies. So again, they're sort of master strategies because we can do them anytime, any place. They're also master strategies because they apply in many, many situations. So we talked about negative self-talk, whatever that phrase is. My famous phrase is, I'm such an idiot. Anytime I make a mistake, I've been saying it since I was small. My mom said it too. I probably picked it up from her. And I've heard my son say it. He's 11. So I've been trying to get that one completely out of my vocabulary. So telling yourself something helpful or supportive, like you're an encouraging friend, rather than saying that negative thing. So I've got this. I successfully worked with this challenge before. Or I'm not going to lose my cool. I'll be more effective that way. Or I mentioned my favorite one is I'm such an idiot. Instead, I like to say, I'm still learning, or I just made a mistake. How can I handle this better next time? And then positive reappraisal is a little bit different. And you may have heard this called reframing, but just reminding yourself that there's another way to look at the situation, a different way to tell the story, just kind of putting a positive spin on it. And we do this sort of naturally, I think. Or I think more and more I've done it naturally as I've been working in this field for 2 decades. So someone cuts me off when I'm driving, or someone bumps into me in a crowded space. And instead of just assuming they did it on purpose, or that person just has complete disregard for everyone around them, it's like, oh, wow, that person may have been in a hurry, or wow, that person, didn't mean to do that, I'm sure, but was too busy to turn around and say, I'm sorry if they bumped into me, etc. So here are some other examples. They're doing the best they can, or maybe they have a lot going on right now. So I just want to ask you, what positive self-talk or positive reframing do you think you could do in your job with something right now that could be helpful for you? And you can put it in the chat and we'll give you a couple seconds here. So something, maybe a negative self-talk that you could turn around to a positive one. I gave the example of I'm such an idiot to I make mistakes and I'm learning. Or maybe a different way you can challenge yourself to look at a situation that you tend to see in a really negative light. Robin, do you have an example of one that you use?
I was thinking about all of my negative self-talk earlier today while I was trying to get on a Google account that I thought I had but couldn't find. And so I would say that my negative self-talk sounds something like, there is no way I'm ever going to be able to do this. And so it would be lovely and generous of myself to give myself the benefit of the doubt, or to a positive lift, and simply say, like you said, Nikki, I'm learning. I'm maybe not good at this now, but I'm going to get better. I'm a digital learner.
That's great. And Kim, thank you for yours too. This is very similar. So we all receive criticism. We all receive feedback, and just reminding ourselves that we're doing the best that we can. We're not good at everything either. And that's someone that I remind myself of when I fail at something, or when I'm not doing well with technology or something else. It's like, this is not my thing, and that's okay.
Yeah, and that's okay. Really important. I do want to say something about positive reappraisal before we move on, after we finish self-talk. So anybody want to weigh in on positive reappraisal, reframing a situation that you're currently in?
It's okay to put my needs first. Tomorrow I can be better. Tomorrow will be different and better. Starting the day with positive thoughts. Keep focused, avoid that snowball effect. It's easy to catastrophize and, oh, everything's going wrong. This is the worst day. Oh, can one more thing happen to me? That's right. It's okay to ask for help. Quit taking it personally. Yeah, I just heard that this year. So someone offered up the acronym QTIP. Quit taking it personally. That's huge.
These are great positive self-talk examples.
Yeah.
Great shifting.
And Robin, some of these were reappraisal too. Did you have another note about reappraisal?
I do, that it can be a slippery slope. If we are constantly saying about someone who's disappointing us or always late or um, not able to get their work in on time, for example, they're just doing the best they can. Or somebody who's really aggressive or mean to us, they're just doing the best they can. They're doing the best they can. We may be setting the stage for ourselves to tolerate a relationship that really isn't working for us, that really leaves us feeling either less than or abused at worst. So I think that's just something important to keep in mind, that if you find yourself in a relationship where you're constantly having to reframe or constantly having to reappraise the situation to give the person the benefit of the doubt, maybe it's not the best fit for you at that time. Does that resonate with anyone?
Yeah, and I would say, as people are typing in the chat, I think it's sort of a slippery slope. I find that extremely helpful in general to kind of in one-off situations to remind myself of, that person may have a lot going on, or that person is doing the best they can with what they know. And, but I think if we're constantly using that as kind of an excuse for another person for them to abuse us, or, then obviously it's not a good strategy.
I can remember a patient many years ago who kept saying about the guy she was with, well, maybe he just didn't learn it. Maybe his mom just never taught him good manners. Maybe his dad modeled aggressive behavior, and I understand. And she kept understanding and understanding, and some point said, I understand, I just don't want to do it anymore. And so it is really important to know your limits when you're reappraising.
Yeah. And I like what Lynn put here. There's a difference between a one-time negative exchange and a recurring theme. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I'll just add, we're talking about emotion regulation strategies for yourself. And I was, I like that person is doing the best they can because it makes me feel better. Instead of getting pissed or angry, I'm reminding myself they're doing the best they can with what they know, and it makes me feel better. However, it might not be the best thing for the relationship. If you're supervising that person, that you need to do more probably over time than just telling yourself they're doing the best they can. You need to have a conversation with them and say, hey, I'm trying to assume positive intent here. However, it's happened many times. And so there might be something more that you need to do once you've gotten past your own emotions and found that first strategy.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hand it over to Robin at this point to talk about that last master thought strategy, envisioning our best selves.
Thank you, Nikki. So I'd like to stop for a moment, pause for a moment at this quote. Between stimulus and response, and please read along with me, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. So as you look at this quote, what words or phrases stand out for you? What feels most important from this quote for you? Growth and freedom, freedom and power. Space, it's a choice. Space, growth, power to choose. Power, choice, space, freedom. Thank you. So Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist during the Second World War, and many have said of him, and he has said of himself, that his mindset helped him to make it through the very challenging time. And it's the way we like to begin our talk about how we can grow that kind of mindset inside of us and be our best self. Thank you. Nikki, next slide. So as we know from this year and from other times where we have been exhausted and depleted, When we're tired and stressed, we tend to use habitual and some of those unhelpful strategies that we just talked about. Venting and complaining, and when complaining is all we do, being aggressive, overeating, and we're not really as much in control and mindful of doing the best as we are at other times. So the tool that we have created, the best self, which is part of a larger tool of taking a pause to think about our best self, was created so that we can prolong the space in time between when we're triggered and when we can respond, so that we move from automatic to conscious strategies, to being more mindful, so that we're aligning what we're doing, what our strategies are, with the best version of ourselves. So automatic processes, the things that happen, grab the cookie, grab the glass of wine, yell at somebody, blame somebody, are unintended, uncontrollable, and as we said just a few minutes ago, thank you, Nikki, effortless and outside of our awareness. They don't need practice. Whereas what we do consciously, intentionally, are things are controllable, effortful, and in our awareness. It's deliberate when we make a choice from our awareness, from our best self. So what does having a best self mean to you? What does it mean in general? And what does it mean to be the best self you can be as a nurse? Tell us in the chat. Happy, professional, and kind. Taking care of yourself, doing the right thing. Taking care of yourself as well as others. Making good choices. Being in the moment. Responding with intention. Acting intentionally. It's interesting, a couple of you have said being able to take care of yourself and others. So what does it mean to be, why is that the best self you can be, taking care of yourself and others? Can you say a few more words about that, John, or someone else who said that?
I mean, I'd be willing to. I mean, that's why we became nurses, right? Because what moves us is being of benefit to society, in one way or another, whatever our our hospital or our school or whatever.
Yeah.
And if we don't take care of ourselves, it's kind of like the thing when they say, when the cabin pressure drops in an airplane, put your own mask on first, because if you don't do that, you can't take care of the person sitting next to you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and so Azra and I see that Lynn agreed with you up there as well. If you take care of yourself, your performance as a nurse will be better, and you'll be much happier. And that's exactly what our skills and tools and strategies are all designed to help you do.
And I'll just add that some of you may have attended our last webinar, because we used a quote that I love, that's self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. So maybe you were inspired by that quote in our last webinar.
No doubt that was true, Nikki. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So how do we think about the best self? We use something called the best self triangle. And you can see here that there are three sides of the triangle, three parts of thinking about our best self. The first is your personal ideal, who you are when you're at your best. If you could be your ideal self every single day, what would that look like? The second part of the triangle, is the reputation you desire, how you want other people to think about you, talk about you, and experience you. That's the reputational self, best self. And then, of course, both of those things, your personal ideal and your reputational best self, are keeping in mind what goals and outcomes you might want. Very often the outcomes have to do with your performance or your relationship. So let's unpack that a little bit more. And if you have a piece of paper and a pen or pencil handy in front of you, that would be super helpful. Let's continue. Nikki, are you still here?
Yeah, I think this is the slide. This is the second slide.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
I didn't notice that on my screen. Okay, so as you can see now, the personal ideal is lit up, and so we're going to focus on that first. So take a minute to think about 3 adjectives that you would use to describe the you want to be. If you could be your best, you could be your ideal at any moment. 3 adjectives. And if you want to think about your personal ideal and your best self in terms of your role specific best self as a nurse, that's your choice. If not, if you'd like to pick another role or a more general core ideal, core best self. So if I were going to do the exercise, I might think right now about my personal ideal as a mom. Who do I most want to be as a mom? And think about those adjectives. And if I was thinking about my personal ideal as a colleague, those adjectives might be different. So what about you? As a nurse, as a mom, as a friend, or something that encompasses all? Thank you for these adjectives. Kinder, not reactive, peaceful. Competent, hardworking, loving. Competent, hardworking, strong, dedicated, wonderful. That's quite the list. Thank you. And the reputational best self. Your desired reputation, how you want to be thought of, experienced, and talked about. Three adjectives. And sometimes those adjectives will overlap. Sometimes they'll be different. When you're thinking about yourself as a nurse, is your reputational best self different than your personal ideal? Is it the same? Is there overlap? Nikki, can you example in your life where your reputation, your desired reputation is different than your personal ideal in a given role?
Yeah, I'll speak to how they're the same and how they're different. I think so. As the director of content communications, having been at the Center for Emotional Intelligence for a long time, just for me, I think it's important that I'm supportive to people, and I want to be that for me. And I think it's important that others see me as someone who's supportive. At the same time, that's something that's different. I think I really value energy, and my personal ideal of myself is energized, energetic. And I do a lot of things to make sure that I have a lot of energy. I really value getting a good night's sleep. I really value eating well and exercising and power naps and tea and all of the things to have a lot of energy. Do I care that others think of me as energetic? Not really. So that's part of my personal ideal, but not part of my reputational best self. So there's overlap sometimes, and then there are different things sometimes.
Thank you, Nikki. I was just noticing it is very dark in my Zoom room and trying to put the light on here. So I'm going to just put the light on.
While Robin's doing that, I'll just say, your best self also may vary as a function of your role. So I started to say some of the things as director of content communications, but I'm also a mom. And so I want to be supportive as a mom, and I want to be supportive as a colleague to those who I work with. But then as a mom, my best self is silly. I have two boys, so they connect with me and listen to me the most when I'm being goofy or silly with them. And that's definitely not part of my best self in some of my other roles. So just to think about that too, that we sort of have different best selves and different types of desired ways of people to think of us, like our reputation, depending on the context and depending on the role.
Thank you, Nikki, for clarifying what we were talking about a few minutes ago about being role specific. That's a great clarification. And when we think about goals and outcomes, one of my goals, one of my favorite ways to think about, or stories to think about my best self, is as a mom. And I remember once when my daughter was in college and she came to me and she told me that she wanted to travel abroad for a junior year abroad. And I really didn't want her to go, but I knew that I wanted to be the kind of mom who would support my daughter's dreams. That was my best self, a mom who would support, mom who was loving, a mom who was patient. And I managed to say to her, okay, let's talk about it. And the reason that I managed to say that was that my goal for the moment was to just keep talking. I knew that if I wasn't in my best self mindset, I would be very upset and just communicate my own anxiety and not listen to her. And that's not what I wanted to be. It's not the way I wanted her to think about me either. So I was aware of my reputational best self. How did I want her to experience her mom at that moment? With the goal in mind of continuing the conversation. I'm happy to say that I did manage to do that. And that years later, when I asked her about whether or not those conversations for her worked and they were helpful, she said she knew that I was very nervous during that conversation, but that I tried really hard to keep it going. And so that's what we mean when we talk about being your best self in a role where your personal ideal comes together with the way you want to be thought of in the service of reaching a particular goal, even if the goal is just to keep talking. Anything you want to add to that, Nikki?
No, I thought it was a great segue into this next section.
Okay, great. Anybody want to give us an example of goals and outcomes that they want to be mindful of in thinking about their best selves?
And I'll add here while you're thinking and writing things in the chat, I mentioned as a mom, it's sort of my goal for my kids to listen to me, and they listen to me more when I'm being silly or goofy with them in some contexts. And then in other ones, when it's a matter of safety and my goal is to protect them, my best self acts a little bit differently. So thinking about goals just in your role, and it varies depending on the day and the situation. And so it really is context specific.
Yeah, controlling your anger in a moment and listening better. And I thank you for that comment, Lynn. I appreciate it. Often we say, oh, what's your goal? I want to have a great reputation. And that's probably always your goal. Or I want to have a great relationship, right? However, in that moment, what's your specific goal? Is often the helpful thing to think about. Other goals that we might have that will help not only drive our personal ideal and reputational best self, but also will just help fill out the strategy choice.
And I'll name some other general ones, like I want to maintain a good relationship with my colleague, or I want to do a good job as a nurse or in whatever job that I'm doing. So they might be things like that too.
Or I want to finish this project, and that's never going to happen if I'm not able to manage myself in the moment. Or I'd like to get somebody's help in a project. I'd like to help someone feel better in the moment. Other goals that you might have. in the moment or long term. Yeah, I'd like to help nurses find their voice. So John, this is back to what you said earlier, that if you can be the best you can be, that perhaps you can then be helpful in helping people be the best they can be.
We have to put John on payroll.
Okay, let's go forward. So in your work as a nurse, what are your top 3 best self qualities? After listing your best self qualities that are from your ideal self and your best self qualities as your reputational self and outcome, right? So you're thinking about the outcome, but what your personal ideal and your reputational self, you listed specific qualities. What are your 3 to 5 best qualities of those 6 or 10 that you've already listed? Take a moment and think about it. And we're going to just call this, identify this as your core best self. The intersection of your personal ideal and your reputational self. Share it if you'd like. Being supportive and resourceful, intentional and fun. Having a sense of humor.
Flexible is an important one for many, many roles, and especially in this world that we're living in right now.
So we have a lot of really wonderful best selves in this Zoom room, Nikki.
Yeah, so it's your best self is what you, when you're thinking of the best version of you. So I guess it's what we hope to be. And we
It's aspirational. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's aspirational. And I think that, well, I don't think the research shows that when we envision our best version of us, more often we become closer to that person. So we close the gap between our actual self and our ideal self. The more we call to mind that ideal or best self, and we put that best self forward, and we become that best self. So it's what we hope to be and what we can become.
And in that interest, it's very useful. We won't go into it today, but on your own, what are the barriers that you see that get in the way of you being your best self? Just something to consider. And we're going to talk for a few minutes about how you can actually achieve that best self. Nikki's going to tell us, where do we get it? How do we do it?
Yeah, and we work with a lot of educators, medical health professionals, lots of different people. And these are some of the words that we've seen in the past. So we thought we'd share that and just kind of reinforce, validate some of the things that came up for all of you. Lots of the same words. So our best selves as humans tend to be similar across the board, across roles, even though sometimes there are some of those discrepancies we discussed. So when can we use our best self? So I mentioned the more you use it, the more you sort of become your best self. So the more you can call to mind that best version of yourself, the more you become that best self. But there are some situations that are especially helpful. So when we are triggered by something, and it might be something real in our environment, we talked about, a colleague who we might not get along with, or a situation that tends to put you in a place where you're not your best self. It also could be something that triggers you just in your mind. So when you think of something and it comes to mind, and those are great opportunities to call the best self to mind, to put your best self forward. In situations where you want to be your best self and you tend not to be, maybe when you're trying to break a bad habit or change a behavior. So you have a habit of being really, really hungry when you get in from work and grabbing the first thing you see, which is usually a bag of chips or ice cream, and not the healthy thing. So before you grab the bag of chips, my best self is healthy. My best self makes healthy choices. My best self. So calling to mind, whatever it is, and I'm just using that one as an example. But so before you're about to engage in that bad habit, calling to mind the better version of you that doesn't engage in that habit as much. So as we said, the best self really helps us to move away from some of those automatic strategies, the ones that can usually be less helpful, the ones that are kind of our go-to automatic ones that are sometimes outside of our awareness, so that we can be more intentional. And the more you do it, the better you get as a person, and the closer you get to your best self. So we want to leave you with some commitments to make on your own. And so just think about some of the adjectives you use to describe your best self, some of the goals and outcomes you thought about, and you can put them in the chat, but think about some specific commitments you can make to embody your best self, things that you can actually, we use the word measurable, but things that you can track over time and say, yeah, I did do the thing that I said I was going to do. So whatever your words are, so to be more empathic, to be more fair, we saw a lot of different ones about thoughtful, to be more caring. What could you do differently? I love it. So if your best self eats just half the bag of chips, do you need to do anything differently? I don't know. So what are some specific commitments you can make so that you are embodying your best self more often? What's something you can do differently starting today? And you may ask yourself, who's going to keep you accountable? Write it down so you can keep yourself accountable. Share it with your loved ones. Share it with your colleagues.
I like your question about the accountability because it eliminates a barrier. If one of the barriers is you are not accountable to anyone, then find someone to be accountable to, and make yourself accountable to you.
So we have some about being more mindful, taking a breath, pausing before reacting. You will absolutely love the 10% Happier podcast. They give you so many ideas. If you want some ideas for how to be even better at that, be more tolerant. So let me push you, Stephanie. So what will you do differently to be more tolerant? Are you using a thought strategy? You're thinking of something differently? Are you doing something differently? What does that look like? Thinking things through, taking more time.
I was thinking to be more patient, especially when I'm very tired with family members. I am going to make a deliberate effort to use the word patience more in daily discourse so that it's more top of mind, pointing out examples of other people who are being very patient. And that will help me remind myself.
Our colleague Erin said, reframe when I venture into negative self-talk land. And similar to that, I would say that I, especially with my close colleagues with whom I've been working for a long time, can go and complain to them more often than I like. And I try to stop myself now when I'm about to pick up the phone, or I'm about to put something in the chat box of the Zoom meeting. And I say, do I really need to say that, and no, because then they say something back, and it's this whole spiral of complaining that never needed to happen in the first place. Make time to do one good thing for yourself. That's great.
Take 15 minutes to myself each day, walking or reading. Something for me and my mental and physical health.
I love this stepping away from work when the workday is over. So hard to do in general, and particularly if any of you are spending any time at home working, which I know nurses are probably doing less of that than we are, but it's tough when work is home and home is work, but it's tough anyway. Be more forgiving.
Well, feel free to share amongst yourself these different strategies and to borrow from other people and be inspired for the strategies for other people have used for themselves.
And all of you in Trumbull who know each other, you can keep each other accountable.
Yeah, great idea.
So we want to leave you with one more quote that we like from the Dalai Lama. The goal is not to be better than the other person, but your previous self. We are all works in progress here. We all make mistakes. We can give ourselves grace. We can give each other grace, and we can work to become a better version of ourselves.
We say very often, and I think I mentioned earlier in the webinar, that this is the work, a journey of a lifetime. Managing your emotions is something you'll always be working on. Getting better all the time.
I have been doing this work 8 hours a day or more, 5 days a week for 20 years, and I still make a lot of mistakes.
So in just a few minutes we have left, do people have any questions for us?
And just a practical note, we'll share the recording. So if you have friends or colleagues who you think could get something from this, or if you want to watch it again, you'll have the recording. Great, and we'll stick around for a little bit just to see if anybody has any questions or anything to add.
Thank you very much for coming today. And for those of you who have been with us the previous webinars, thank you for attending. And I hope it was helpful and that you were able to take away some very concrete tools and strategies.